video stream is going. The audio stream is now live. If you do not see the video stream appearing on the screen in a couple of seconds, you can just reload the page and it should come up.
Freedom Talk Radio.
Yep, and here we go.
10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Freedom Talk Radio 2013 Network, and you are listening to
Surrounded by Idiots.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Good evening, everybody. Today is Saturday, November 16th, 2013, and unlike most weeks, I actually remembered what the date was tonight. We are live on the air with our, I believe this is the third episode that we are doing on Saturday nights. It is working out splendidly so far because it gives me an entire day to do some extra preparation for the show. A lot of you have been sending me emails and whatnot and communicating with me on Facebook, and I have some excellent news. My brother is an expat living in the Philippines. He is married to a Filipino national who is a excellent school teacher, and they went through the typhoon that went through the Philippines. The day after the typhoon went through there and we started learning about the damage, I went to the Red Cross website and I donated some money to the Red Cross. And I also sent them an email that I have a brother living over there and we haven't been able to make contact with him. Next, I contacted the State Department and I talked to some very nice people at the State Department. And they directed me directly to the consulate over in Manila, and I talked to them, and they were attempting to locate my brother. And 2 days later, I believe that would be on Tuesday of this week, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, I got an email from my sister-in-law that said they were safe, they were alive, and they were okay. And we have been communicating ever since, and I'm going to tell you from an eyewitness report that I have from my sister-in-law, who has lived in the Philippines all of her life. She's a native there. That the situation there is worse than horrible. The way she describes it, the stench in the air of dead bodies rotting is unbelievable. The aid shipments up until, this may have been corrected by now, but the aid shipments have been attacked by the rebels there. There was one aid shipment that they attempted to hijack. Unfortunately for them, the rebels, that is, there were some Marines and the Filipino military, and it didn't end well for the rebels. There have been people dying trying to get into warehouses and walls collapsing on them, trying to get to the rice and everything. And what I've been doing is I've been sending money to my sister-in-law direct, and she is buying food and distributing it herself because she is a school teacher and she's taking care of the families of the kids that she teaches. So that is some pretty good news. On the medical front, my neurocardiogenic syncope is giving me a lot of problems this week because there is a cold going around where I work during the day. And as you know, neurocardiogenic syncope gives you muscle pains and your blood pressure is not regulated. And your heart is pretty much unregulated too because it's a nerve disconnection between the brain and the heart. And it basically feels like I have the flu all the time. So I'm on some rather strong medications to keep the pain away. And when you get a cold, when you have this, it becomes almost unbearable because you get the muscle aches with the cold and the muscle aches with the NCS, and it's brutal. But I have the secret cure. I use a zinc spray, an atomizer spray called Zicam, that I spray into my throat 3 or 4 times a day. It makes food taste really bad for a couple of days afterwards, but it keeps the cold from going into my chest and my head, which is what I'm after, because it's not a good situation when you get sick with this medical condition. And now let's go on to the main part of tonight's show, which I have been looking forward to for several weeks, as a matter of fact, since his publicist contacted me. As you know, I am now attempting to give people solutions. Rather than crying and complaining about all the problems that we have, which are many, I am looking for people, for guests, that can give us solutions and discuss with us all of the different things that are going on. This week's guest has written an excellent fictional account of the next major terrorist threat against the United States. It is called, let me get the front page of the book up here, and of course the broadcasting computer doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. It is called The Brotherhood of the Red Nile, A Terrorist Perspective, by Mr. Dan Perkins. This book, I am about 2/3 of the way through the book. It's pretty darn good. It is a fictional account of a terrorist organization that is far more advanced than the old clunky Model T version Osama bin Laden gang, Al-Qaeda. It's written in a very believable format, taking the reader from the first dreams that the terrorists have to the sweaty palm tension that fills Homeland Security, the CIA, and FBI as they try to noodle out exactly what the terrorists are going to attempt. The name of the author is Dan Perkins, and he is with us tonight on the line, and I am going to bid him a excellent good evening to you, sir. How are you? And thank you for joining our audience.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Yes. What do you think of what's going on in the Philippines? Let's get that out of the way first, because that is a heck of a thing over there.
As we talked before we went on the air, it is amazing. You know, we have some neighbors here where we live who are from the Philippines, and the wife is a pediatrician, and she has family in the Philippines. And she went back for the first time in about 15 years last summer. And she was shocked at the poverty and the squalor, as she said. And it shows how the economy has not progressed, and that there are more people and more people competing for resources that are limited. So when you have a natural disaster like this, and you have high concentrations of people in shacks, unfortunately, Mother Nature can be give us terrible punishment with what she can do with her forces. And I think that's a situation that I don't know that you could prevent it. I thought it was interesting, at least from what I've been all over the country this week, and I haven't seen any of the global warming people blaming the tsunami in the Philippines on global warming. Now, I may have missed it, but I didn't see it anywhere. So it's interesting. Mother Nature does what it wants to with us, and for the most part, we are absolutely helpless to deal with it. As I said, I spent my summer and fall in North Jersey, and we had Hurricane Sandy come through here in New Jersey and just devastated the Jersey shore. Not to the extent that what happened in the Philippines, primarily because the economy and the life existence of the people in the Philippines close to the water are not resorts, but in fact are underdeveloped towns that don't have a lot of infrastructure. And when you've got an 18 to 20 foot wall of water coming at you at a very fast pace, it just destroys everything. There's no natural resistance in where they live, and it's a tragedy, but not much that we can do about that tragedy. except pray and send money and hope that the money that we send gets the proper food supplies and water and everything into those people to help them as much as they can. But when you have a natural disaster of this magnitude, I was talking to some people last week when I was down in South Florida. We have a neighbor who's a doctor who is not another doctor on our court who has been going down to Haiti. And she goes twice a year with a team of doctors to work as volunteers. They pay their own way. And she told me the last time I saw her, which was this summer, that there's not been a lot of progress between when the hurricane first hit and today. The people are getting food and water, but there's been no expansion or rebirth of the economy, and it's very depressing to her. But she still goes to try and help people. And we have different economies throughout the world that have different things going on. And when Mother Nature decides to attack us, which she does periodically, if we have the resources, we can rebuild. If we don't have the resources, we have to depend upon other nations to help us. And that's what I see going on. Is there is a significant groundswell for support to provide aid to the people of the Philippines from countries all over the world, and that's a good thing.
Yes, we did the same thing with Haiti, and it really is sad that that economy there hasn't gotten back up and shaken itself off and continued on.
Right.
I know the Philippines, they have Manila, thankfully, was not heavily damaged by the typhoons, so they at least have their centralized national government still intact. In fact, my brother, when he moved over there, it's very interesting to talk to somebody that's used to this country that is dealing with a totally different economy. He decided what he was going to do is he was going to start an internet cafe because so few people have computers over there.
Right.
So he built his own internet cafe, and you got have some money you can spare. And at that time, I had more money than I do now, so I sent him $100, and $100 over there is like 10 years' wages for those people.
Yeah.
So he was able to have all the carpentry work done, buy all the computers for the store, and do a bunch of other work just for that $100. And he was amazed that the exchange rate is so skewed with those economies, and it really is. It's really something to think about.
But I heard this. I agree with what you're saying, but let me give you a different perspective. Not that I'm disagreeing with what you're saying, but I just want you to hear a perspective I heard in New York on the news today, this morning. And they're reporting what's going on in the Philippines. And they were talking about the lines at the gas station. You can't bring in your car. You can only bring containers that you can carry. So they're limiting the amount of gas that you can get, and the wait in line is like 5 to 6 hours. Food is 7 hours. Here's the irony. The third item they talk about was 5 hours to wait to charge their cell phones.
Huh.
So we're talking about food, and we're talking about other things, and yet at the same time, in this areas of this country which are very poor, we're talking about 5 hours to wait to charge your cell phone. So it's fascinating to me that we're dealing with that situation of charging cell phones is one of the three major areas that take a lot of time in this national disaster. So it's amazing. I wanted to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Now, I know you haven't seen Book 3 or Book 2 because Book 2 is coming out in about 2 weeks. But let me give you an analogy to see how you would react to this. We talked about the tsunami coming against the Philippines. What if you were living in the southwestern United States and a nuclear device went off in an extreme concentration of natural gas and oil pipelines that destroyed refineries and started to contaminate all of the oil and natural gas in the pipelines heading in all directions of the country? What if you had a radioactive tsunami under the ground in the United States.
That is, Dan. That is one of the things that keeps me awake at night. I know. I know for the listeners, those that listen regularly know that I worry about that sort of thing. One of my greatest fears is that Iran or North Korea or another country that doesn't like us, that has missile capability, throws a nuclear bomb up into orbit and sets it off above the central United States and knocks out virtually all of our infrastructure in one fell swoop. Your nuclear bomb going off and irradiating the oil is essentially very, very similar. It would grind the economy to a halt. Food deliveries would not be able to be made. It would set us back probably, I would say, maybe 20 years in our infrastructure, if not more, and many, many people would die.
Yeah, you indicated that you have been reading book one, and if we could talk a little bit about book one, because it's so pertinent to what you're talking about. What I try to do in book one is to try and help the American people begin to understand why the Muslims, especially the radical Muslims, hate us so much. And in the beginning of the book, when you first meet the five terrorists, what you find out, as you pointed out earlier in your discussion, is that these terrorists are not your father's terrorists. They don't ride camels. They don't have beards. They don't wear funny cloths on their heads. They don't live in caves. And they don't eat camel jerky. And they don't shoot their guns in the air. In fact, they don't even own guns. They were all educated in Western universities, most of them in the United States. And so we have a situation where, as we get to understand the culture and the life of these five terrorists, we begin to hopefully understand who these people are and why they feel the way they do about us as the United States. It's intriguing, and I'm not going to spoil it for your audience because I obviously want them to read the book. But the makeup of the five members is quite. It's one of the first twists in the book, and it's in the very first few pages. But their leader, Mohammed al-Sargon, says to them at the very first meeting, I want you to bring your expertise and look at every attack that Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda has brought against the United States, whether it was inside the United States or outside the United States. And then he asks them this question, tell me and tell your brothers, what did they do wrong? And then there's a whole discussion about all the events that took place and what did they do wrong. And then he tells them that we have two old Soviet Union suitcase dirty bombs, and we have a strategic alliance with the Iranian nuclear program to rebuild these into functioning nuclear weapons of mass destruction. And then he charges each of these specialists with this charge. How would you use them against the United States? Where would you use them? To what outcome? And the book then evolves into four different scenarios, how these people think and the things that they've chosen. Now, I can tell you that people who have read this book say the scenarios are scary real. They're all plausible. They're all possible. And people find it very difficult to put this book down once they start it. I did an interview a week ago this past Monday with a gentleman who said he had read the book, and he told the audience, I've read the book all the way through, and I have to tell you, I couldn't put the damn thing down, and it just scared the hell out of me. That's really a good thing because that's what I'm trying to do as a writer to entertain my audience. I will tell you that in book one, there are two emotions about the ending of the book, and that is people either love it or hate it. But I will tell you that the people who've told me that they hate it immediately ask me, when can I see book two? And so what's interesting to me is that there's what a local newspaper did an interview of me, and they said the title of the article was "The Story Behind the Story." And the story behind the story is how I came to become a writer. At 67 years of age, I had been in the money management business for 40 years. I still continue to manage money. And on Sanibel Island, there's a place called the Big Arts Center. And they provide enrichment classes for the residents of the island. And I saw, for the 2012 winter season, a 4-session course on Introduction to Writing Mysteries and Thrillers. And I'd taken clay and glass and watercolors and all kinds of things. So I decided I would try this course. And I walked in the first day of the class, which was February the 6th, 2012. I went home and I sat down at my computer and I wrote 1,000 words. I wrote the title of the book and the main story, and I could see in my mind how the book ended. So I went in the following week and I showed the instructor what I had done, and she'd written 12 novels. And I told her that I could see how the book ended, and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I can see the last line in the last paragraph on the last page." She said, "For somebody who's never had an experience, that's not really normal." What I didn't tell her was I knew how book 2 started and ended, and book 3 started and ended, and I hadn't written a word in those. I went home and I wrote book 1, 400 pages, in 90 days. The second installment of the trilogy is about 480 pages, and I wrote that in 90 days. And the third installment is about 450 pages, and I wrote that in 90 days. So from February the 6th of 2012, with the first keystroke on the computer board, to September the 6th, 2013, 18 months, I wrote a trilogy, 3 books, 3 novels in 18 months, going from never written anything in my life. What you don't know, however, is that in the last 30 days, I signed a contract to make a movie out of book 1.
Oh, excellent. You know, I was reading the book, and I'm thinking to myself that this kind of reads like, a friend of mine said, this reads like a script. And I said,
many director tells me it reads like a screenplay the way it's written.
Yeah, and it's like some of the chapters are only like 2 paragraphs long.
Right. It's the chapters average between 650 and 1,250 words.
Yeah, and it's great. I like books that are like that because, frankly,
keeps
folks,
you engaged.
It not only keeps you engaged, it keeps your imagination active. That is the type of book that I look for. I read a lot of Larry Niven novels. He's a science fiction writer. Mm-hmm. And I also read, Kuntz, and I used to read Stephen King a long time ago. And I like those books. But King, he just drags it into the weeds of the minutia and describes the threads in somebody's tie. I really don't care about the threads in somebody's tie. If your writer wants to say he's wearing a red tie, fine. I don't care. I want to know what's going on. And
I had a gentleman tell me in an interview, he said, "I read your book, and I like the short chapters." He said, you write with enough detail to keep me interested, but as you just said, you don't put me in the weeds trying to figure out all the stuff. And he said to me, that really shocked me, but all of a sudden, I've had like 6 or 7 different people say the same thing. It really reminds me of early Tom Clancy. If you read The Hunt for Red October, same kind of style, short chapters, a lot of pace, a lot of cliffhangers, which I'm just shocked at that people would think of me in the same category. And he said, you got to think, with Lee Child and Tom Clancy gone now, who's going to pick up the mantle? Who's going to fill the space? And maybe you're supposed to fill the space. And I said, well, those are pretty big shoes to fill. But I do find people that tell me that they can't, as they read the book, they can't figure out whether they're watching a big screen, like in a movie theater, or watching a television screen watching the news. It's very hard to distinguish between fiction and reality. And on the front cover of the book, you'll notice that it says, this book is as current as today's headlines, but scarier than tomorrow's. And I had a producer who read the book who told me that we were talking to, and he said, I consider myself to be a real, a pretty good amateur sleuth. I've read thousands and thousands of scripts and books, and he said, I can't figure out where your cliffhangers are going. And I got so frustrated that he said, I just decided to hell with it. I'm just going to see what he does and sit back and enjoy it. So this book is there was there's an article on the website from a paper that did a review of the book, and towards the end of the interview or the review, the reporter said the thriller space is getting tired. And with Clancy gone and Childs gone, Patterson no longer really writing his own books, and other people not really writing their books any longer, this space really needs a fresh face. And she said, maybe Mr. Perkins is that fresh face we've been looking for. And I'm saying at 67 years old, I'm a fresh face.
That's at 67, you've got a lifetime of experience, and you know the story that you want to tell, and that is excellent. That is, I like the writing style.
Thank you.
I really do. I'll tell the potential readers this, and folks, this would make an excellent Christmas gift for somebody. You can get it at Amazon.com. You can get it at Dan's website. Let me give you the address here if I can stumble through this. It's called Dan Perkins at Sanibel.com. That's spelled just like the island in Florida, Sanibel Island. Dan Perkins at Sanibel Island, Sanibel.com.
Right, and remind your listeners that it's not the at signal. It is the preposition, the word at.
Yes, you just did that. That takes a little bit of load off of me. That's great. I like that. That's excellent.
So that's book one. Book two is the Brotherhood of the Red Nile, America Rebuilds. And that's the story of, and again, a very unusual situation. Book two starts 12 hours before the end of book one, so that a person who hasn't read book one can pick up book two, and they can see what's going on and get involved. And so the challenge in book two is for the government and for the principal players is how do we deal with this devastation? And I've had people tell me that they take a breath on the first page and they feel like they don't take another breath for page 100. It's very fast-paced. There's chaos everywhere. All kinds of things are going on, and we're testing the ability of our government to function in a time of the worst national crisis we've ever experienced. And if book one is a psychological thriller, there's also in book two a psychological impact, but also the devastation that's illustrated becomes very real, and again, big screen, small screen. And so it's also engaging, full of cliffhangers, same style, 650 to 1,250 words in a chapter. And it begins to deal with something that you and I talked about before we went on the air, and it, how do we as a country respond? And I was mentioning to you on September 11th every year in New York City, we have a memorial service for the people who died in the World Trade Center attack. And the day after that this year, the head of Al-Qaeda made a speech in which he said, and you can get it on the internet, he said, America needs to bleed. If we can make America unstable to the point that they will continue to shift more and more resources away from the economy to the security, we can slow down the American economy. and we'll put people out of work, and the unemployment rate will continue to rise. And we need what, I'm just paraphrasing him, he's saying, what we need in America are what are called lone wolf attacks. And these are attacks by one or two people in a particular situation to create fear and disrupt American life and the economy. Well, go figure the Boston Marathon bombings. And I took the Boston Marathon bombings as an opportunity to send out a press release saying what America needs to really understand is that the attack in Boston was not about body count. It was about dollar count. Those two young men in Boston held hostage the entire Boston metropolitan population. The government said to the people, go home, lock your doors and windows, and stay inside until we tell you to come out. That decision by the government, which I'm not going to fault with them, but what happened is those two young men who didn't look anything like terrorists, if you saw their pictures, with their caps turned backwards and their backpacks on, and their blue jeans, and looked like college students, those two young men cost the economy of Boston in excess of $1 billion for that 5 days. And I said to people, you have to go back and look at the September 11th bombings. And what I was saying to them was, look, you have to understand it's about money. And those two young men I see on the screen don't look like terrorists or your father's terrorists. They don't have a towel on their head. They don't have beards and mustaches. They're clean-shaven. They look like clean-cut American kids. The point being is that what happened on September the 11th is that, yes, we took down the World Trade Centers, and yes, we killed 2,300 people. Now, the next statistic I'm about to give you makes my wife wince every time I do it, but it's important to understand. Based on the current birth rate in the United States, the 2,700 people that were killed in the World Trade Center bombing were replaced in 43 minutes in the population. If you understand that the point of Osama bin Laden was to knock down the buildings, but really what he was trying to do was to shut down the American capital markets, and he did. He shut down the American capital markets and created, in essence, a recession by attacking on those two buildings. It's another example why it's about money. It isn't about body count. We as a country do not know much, if anything, about how Muslims think, especially radical Muslims. Just to give you an example of a couple of pieces that are going to be in my new series of books is a discussion about Sharia law. Now, I don't know whether many of your listeners understand Sharia law or you've ever talked about it, so I'm only going to pick with two pieces. There's a provision in Sharia law that allows a Muslim, when he is working with an infidel, a non-Muslim, he can lie, cheat, steal, do whatever he wants, and if whatever they do together fails, it is never his fault. It is always the infidel's fault. Always the infidel's fault. Why? Because everything that Muslims do are for a specific goal, and that's for the spread of Islam, and that's what they do. Now, there's another provision that deals the conduct under Sharia law of government officials and religious leaders. And what it says is that religious leaders and government officials can, when they're dealing with infidels, non-Muslims, can lie and do whatever they want to make sure that they further the goals of Islam. Now, when the President of the United States welcomed the new president of Iran, the next day, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, said to the world, you cannot trust this man, he lies. He can tell you, under Sharia law, that he's not doing anything to expand any nuclear weapons capacity, while at the same time doing it because he's permitted to do it under Sharia law because it furthers the goals of Islam. So they can stand right there. Now, this past week, I mean, we had all this situation with Obamacare. Most people are not aware that the UN is now beginning to question whether or not the Syrian government has disclosed all of their chemical weapons. What a surprise. A Muslim country that would be lying to the world because it's in their best interest. Now, another one I think is a real interesting example under Sharia law. It says that a Muslim woman cannot marry a Jew infidel. Now, we have in the United States, in the city of New York, where I live part-time in that area, we had a recent mayoral primary. And one of the candidates in that primary was a gentleman by the name of Anthony Weiner, a former congressman who had to leave Congress because of his activities. He is married. His wife's name is Uma. She is a Muslim. Now, under Sharia law, normally under Sharia law, there would be no way in which a Muslim woman could marry outside of the faith, especially a Jew. But they allowed it to take place because the belief was that if she marries Anthony Weiner and he's elected mayor, then she can begin to, through her influence of her husband, begin to change the laws in New York City to look more like some of the laws in Sharia law. And if he were to be successful as mayor and decide to run for governor, then she would be the first lady of the state of New York and would have some possibility of influence. So because what she was doing was to the potential benefit of Islam, she was allowed to walk away from the laws that said that you must marry within your faith and you cannot marry a Jew. All was waived because what she was doing potentially was going to be to the benefit of Islam. And I don't know whether most people know this, she was also the chief of staff for Hillary Clinton. So, why is that all important? It's all important because Muslims are the fastest growing population in the world. They're all over the world. And as they grow in population, they grow in power. Look at France, look at England, of how the Muslims have had cultural impact on those countries. And it's causing the French and the English to begin to rebel because the governments are so politically correct, they're bowing to the Muslims in their countries. And so their job, they want to dominate the world any way they can, and as in many ways as they can. So what I'm trying to do is to say, look, you have to be aware of these things, and where are the vulnerabilities of us as a country? That's why the first book is so important. The second book is important because it says how do we deal with that catastrophic attack when it comes, because I believe it ultimately is coming. And then book 3, what do we do about the problem of terrorism in the world? Now, book 3, which is done, would normally come out a year from now, but everybody wants me to bring it out in late spring, early summer, because everybody wants to know what the response is. But I can tell you that there are people, my readers and other people, who have looked at book 3, and they tell me there are many sections in book 3 that they feel like standing up and clapping and applauding. So it's difficult to walk the line between reality and fiction. In book 2, there's a quotation on the front cover deals with the difference between which is scarier, reality or fiction. And the answer is, when you can't tell the difference, fiction is scarier. So the idea is, as a writer, forget all the political situation, my job is to entertain people, get them engaged. And I've been told that these are an extremely engaging series for a first-time writer.
Now, your background is in the finance, right?
Yes, I've been a registered investment advisor for 40 years.
Excellent. we talked about this before we went on the air, and I think this plays into, and I haven't read the second book. I don't have the galley proof or anything. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. But I have a copy of a report that came out in, what was it? I think it was 2009. And the title of the copy of the report is Economic Warfare, Risks, and Responses. This was prepared for the Pentagon. And in 2009, it created quite a splash when it came out because of what it proposed. And the proposition that it puts forth is this. Let me scroll down here. This is in the executive summary of the report, and I've read this 100 times on the show, so it's good to have an expert's opinion on this. The author says this. The hypothesis under consideration is that a three-phase attack is underway with two of those phases completed to date. The first phase was a speculative run-up in oil prices that generated as much as $2 trillion of excess wealth for oil-producing nations, filling the coffers of sovereign wealth funds, including those of Sharia-compliant finance. The second phase appears to have begun in 2008 with a series of bear raids targeting U.S. financial services firms that appear to be systematically significant. And the third phase, which he believes was about to begin, is a economic attack, a direct attack on the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. dollar. And at about the same time, and this is an audio clip that I am going to play, at about the same time there was an interview on Financial Times TV, FT television. And it was an interview with George Soros. And George Soros said in the interview, and I quote, we have to create a new world order with the Chinese apparently at the head of it. And he also says this during that interview.
So an orderly decline of the dollar is actually desirable.
So you have George Soros that is attempting, I believe, to manage a quote-unquote orderly decline of the dollar. We have, and I believed all along that the run-up on the speculation on the price of oil was part of some sort of an attack, because that sort of stuff just simply doesn't happen by accident. There was a reason behind it, and it just made no sense at the time. And if you recall, that ground this economy to a screeching halt. And then we also had the financial issues. And I don't believe in coincidences. I think they were both done on purpose. And I think somebody, or a group of somebodies, is working behind the scenes right now to collapse the system. And unfortunately, these clowns in Washington appear to be playing along with them. What say you to that?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I don't think I disagree with you, but I would like to I'd like to have an attempt to scare you a little.
Okay.
Let's go back to Sharia law, because I sent out a press release a few weeks ago, and I said to the public, the press release had this question: is the administration governing the nation under the Constitution or under Sharia law?
Oh, I've got an opinion about that.
Well, but this thing, now let me make my point. Then you can talk. If you understand, I don't know, and I have no way of knowing until and if he ever admits that he is a Muslim. So I don't have any way of knowing whether or not the President of the United States is a Muslim. But I do think that there is a situation where if you start to look at certain things, you can begin to say to yourself, wow, are decisions being made for the good of the people or the good of somebody else? Now let me give you a couple of quick examples. Let's talk about what everybody's talking about today, and has been talking for the last week, and that was the collapse of Obamacare. If you understand that, as I talked to you earlier, that under Sharia law, everything is based on a goal, and that goal is the expansion of Islam. Now, I'm saying that I believe that there are people in our government who may not be Muslims, but understand the principles of Sharia law and may in fact have been applying them in the governing of the United States. If you can be non-emotional and you can be objective and you look at Obamacare, it doesn't take rocket science to understand that the ultimate goal was single-payer health care, which meant that the government was going to take over 20% of the economy and control the health care for every American man, woman, and child. So why was it important for them to control that? Why is it that this government has added $8 trillion of debt in the 5 years that Mr. Obama has been president? And we still have 91.5 million people out of work. We have 48 million people on food stamps, and we have an unemployment rate probably closer to 12 than 7. We have an unemployment rate in the black community that's now close to 14. Now, if we had a true liberal president in the sense of trying to be a president who was there to support the black community and get them moving again, he certainly failed there. But one only has to look at and say, if you remember what I said, if you are a Muslim and you're dealing with an infidel, the infidel, whatever happens, if it turns out bad, the infidel is always responsible for the outcome, never the Muslim. If you look at back from the period of time in October when we were dealing with the potential shutdown of the government and the debt ceiling, the Democrats basically continued to say about the Republicans, terrorist, anarchist. They had bombs dropped on their back. They continued to attack rather than admit any fault whatsoever. They put all the blame on the Republicans. They were saying to the rest of the world, we are innocent of this mistake. It's all the responsibility of the Republicans. So if one looks at Sharia law and understands that if you're dealing with infidels, you deflect all responsibility away from you and place it upon other people. And we have a president of the United States who's told us on at least 32 occasions, if you like your health care plan, you can keep it, period. If you like your doctor, you can keep it, period. But in addition to that, he's told us a bunch of other things. I don't really know what happened in Benghazi, or I don't know this, or I don't know that. I wasn't aware that the website wasn't functioning. Does it sound like he's putting the blame on other people, somebody else? He has no responsibility? If the President of the United States cannot take responsibility for the healthcare system, for the loss of 4 Americans in Benghazi, the activities of the IRS on dealing with nonprofits registration, on and on and on. If it's never his responsibility, it always goes to somebody else, then that reminds me an awful lot like Sharia law. And so what we're trying to do here is to say, if I'm right that the ultimate goal of the radical Muslims is destroy the American economy, all those activities that brought down the dollar, the inability to drill for oil and natural gas on our own lands, and not let the government giving us no ability to drill and develop our own natural resources. All those things are designed to drain the resources of the U.S. economy. And that's what the Muslims are trying to do. And so, while I said, and I'll say it again, I'm not saying that the president is a Muslim, or that Harry Reid is a Muslim, or Nancy Pelosi is a Muslim. But what I'm saying is that the liberal agenda and their activities certainly mirror many portions of Sharia law.
I believe that you are correct, and I have my Crayola box of crayons out to add some color to that, because what you just said is something actually that I have said since 2008, actually 2007 and beyond, because I believe, and I think this will add some color to what you just said, about Obamacare. What does it do? It scares the pants off of people. It scares everybody, because essentially everybody's going to lose their health care plan in the end. If the purpose of a terrorist attack is to scare a population, frighten a population, and bring an economy to a halt, then Obamacare fits the bill as a terrorist attack.
Absolutely.
The other thing is this, and I said this to somebody who was planning on voting for Obama in 2008. I said, just wait till this guy gets elected, because he is a liberation theologist. He believes in liberation theology. Liberation theology goes hand in hand with Sharia law. There are many, many areas where they coalesce together. You can't tell the difference a lot of times between liberation theology and Sharia law, because, as we have seen, Obama has no idea that any of this happened. It's not his fault. It's your fault, because you didn't understand what he was saying. You didn't understand what he meant. In fact, let me bring this up right here, because you mentioned it, and I have been waiting. Let me see here.
I gave you the opening to do it, huh?
Yep, you did.
If you have your plan and you like it, and you like your doctor, then you don't have to change plans. The government
$35 million out of the U.S. economy and send it to Canada to a friend of Michelle on a no-bid contract. That's $635 million that isn't available to do something else in the economy. I heard this morning, and I heard it yesterday, and if I be so bold to ask you a question.
Yes.
I've heard it twice in the last 2 days. I was on a very long road trip to get back to New Jersey. I was down in Florida, and I was in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee and all over, and I was doing interviews as I was driving my way back. But what I heard in the latter part of the week, Thursday and Friday, and I heard it again this morning, that the fallout of Obamacare may be the destruction of liberalism in this country. What do you think?
I've heard that. I actually was listening to the show when it happened. I'm not buying it, and this is why. First of all, these the liberals, the progressives, the communists among us, as I like to call them, they simply will not back off. It's always going to be somebody else's fault. It's always going to be the fault of the conservatives, the Republicans, whoever happens to be at hand, who's ever criticizing them. It's always their fault. Mm-hmm. They're going to double down. We've seen that with Obama. We saw that during the shutdown. When the key was, okay, we're going to make it hurt as much as possible for everybody. Mm-hmm. You want to back these people that are conservatives that want to take us back to a constitutional government? Fine. We're going to make it hurt as much as possible. We're going to punish you. It's not going to be the end of liberalism. They're just going to double down, and it's just going to get worse. And do you
think that the American people, I don't know whether this is true, what I was hearing about polls this morning, they can forgive a president who makes a mistake.
Yep.
But they can't forgive a president who lies to them about one of the most important things in their life, and that's health care.
No, they won't. I think
so. His legacy is, in a word, toast.
Yes. You're exactly correct.
What a waste of a presidency.
It is. I had, when I told my friend that you just wait till you get a hold of that liberation theology and see how much that hope and change works for you. Mm-hmm. I was actually hoping that that was not going to be the case. Here we have the first minority president elected, and it would have been so nice if he could have been a great president along the lines of a Ronald Reagan. Just an absolutely stunningly beautiful, perfect president. But he's done nothing but fumble around and stumble. He hasn't had a meeting with his cabinet in something like 9 months. Their cabinet his cabinet is treated like outsiders and idiots. And as far as their website goes, I can tell you right now, I run a whole lot of websites. I can tell you exactly within minutes how many people have been on the website, what pages they've looked at, what they've done, where they've come from, their computer system that they're running, their browser that they're using, how long they were there, what their path was through the website. And for them to say, well, we're not going to have that until the middle of next month is garbage, because it works. And what you see on the screen right now, for those of you that are on the video side of the broadcast, is a website called thehealthplansherpa.com, made by these three young lads that you see on the screen. And this is how a healthcare website should go. I'm going to put in my zip code, 48176. Click Find Plans, and instantly there are the plans that are available to me. Obamacare website doesn't work. And right now, I know on this site there have been 36,711 people that have liked it, and almost 3,000 people have tweeted about it. And there you go. That's how easy it is to do. But one of the things that they're doing, Dan, is they're taking all of your information, your bank account, your Social Security, and everything else first. It's like one of those credit card sites that wants your Visa card number before they'll give you your credit score. It's the same principle. One of those sales sites where you have to give them your email address before you're allowed to watch the video promising the latest whiz-bang solution to get rich. And they're taking your information, and it says right on the website you have no expectation of privacy. So you're giving them all of your private information, your bank account, your routing number, your social security number, where you live, how many people are in your family, and everything else. And what do you get for it? You can't even get back into the site.
I was listening to a computer person yesterday on Sean Hannity's show as I was driving up through Pennsylvania, and he said he called in. He was a caller, and he thought that the Obamacare website was fantastic. And Sean was just shocked that he said this. He says, I don't understand. What do you mean it's fantastic? He said, if you really understand how the website works, it's designed to hide everything from you. It captures a great deal of information about you, but it hides a bunch of stuff. Like, it's very difficult to look, as you're doing, to look at plans, to find out what your deductible is going to be. He says he believes it was designed that way on purpose to make it more difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
So I'm not a computer expert. I know how to turn them on and I know how to move my mouse, but beyond that, that's beyond my area of expertise.
I can tell you as a somebody that people call a computer expert that that person is exactly correct. That is what it does. It obfuscates, and it doesn't let you into the portal. It's like one of those websites. I'm sure that you've been to this type of website before. You get to the website, and it's filled with double talk and gobbledygook language. And you never find out what their product is. You can't tell how to buy the product, but they want you to contact them with all of your information before they'll tell you about the product. And it's the same thing. And that's the federal government that's doing this. And it is it makes no sense until you consider that the end result is to scare people. That's what it's designed to do, to destroy the economy. The question is, the next question I have for you is, why are they trying to destroy the economy?
Trying to destroy the economy because, very simply, and I believe this, that the influence of the Muslim faith, especially the radical Muslims, is, if we go back to what we talked about, Osama bin Laden didn't want to bring down the buildings per se. He wanted to shut down the American capital markets. If we take the money away from America, we have more and more of the resources of America being diverted to things that do not make wealth for America. In fact, destroy wealth. That's exactly what the Muslims want to try and do. Because once you take away America's money, what's left? Nothing.
Nothing.
And that's what they're trying to do. That's their goal. So they haven't given up. Obama, in the way he's trying to govern, and the process is doing a lot of the Muslims' work for them.
I agree.
You take away America's wealth, you take away its power. You take away its power, then Muslims are the largest single population in the world.
That is true. And what we're looking at right now on the video side of the broadcast is an article that is from October 13th, 2011. And a good friend of mine, Alexander Backman, he is a investigative reporter down in Mexico. He does excellent work. He was on for, I think, 3.5 hours that night. We were discussing this, what we believe to be the fact that the Muslim Brotherhood has infiltrated almost all of our government agencies, including the Pentagon. We saw that with the shooting that was called a workplace violence, where the psychiatrist yelled Allahu Akbar and started shooting up troops that were coming back from Afghanistan.
Right.
So we're seeing it. The guy's definitely a Muslim, and even though they call it workplace violence, I believe that's another clue along our path of what you've been talking about, because they call it workplace violence. They don't call it for what it is, a terrorist attack by a Muslim.
Exactly.
My question for you is, given your experience, and your experience shows in your book, what sort of events can we look forward to in the near term, do you think? What do you think they're planning?
Well, I do think that they're planning. I think part of what's going on here is that the Iranian government is continuing its development on nuclear weapons, and I believe that there's a very good possibility that before our president is finished his second term, we're going to find that Iran has nuclear capability for weapons. Now, I know that a lot of people say they don't have enough plutonium and all that stuff. I'm just saying, or enriched uranium. I'm saying they are working 24/7 to be able to build some kind of a nuclear device. Whether they use it or not, I'm not sure, but they could threaten to use it. And the question then becomes, will the rest of the world, who has become so politically correct, will it go after the sources of those weapons and destroy them, or will they allow them to become the new dictators in the Middle East? I think that the situation as it relates to Obamacare will be a setback for the subtleties of takeover, which may cause a rise in actual attacks because that particular attack failed. So we may see more physical attacks than we're seeing today because of the failure of Obamacare. And I think there was this discussion today whether two-thirds majority of the House and Senate, they could gather two-thirds of the majority of the House and Senate to override a presidential veto to get rid of Obamacare. The longer this goes, the more people that are in pain, the more pressure will be on the Democrats to support a move to get rid of Obamacare. That will be a great, great disappointment to them because it means that we're going to reverse a trend that was really going to be working in their favor. If I were sitting in an Al-Qaeda operative center somewhere, I would be very concerned that right now the greatest risk to them is that when Mr. Obama leaves office, he's replaced by a Ronald Reagan type conservative who changes the whole mix. That would be a great fear, as I see, and that they would want to step up their physical attacks.
Sadly, that is exactly what I was thinking.
Scary, huh?
I would also add the caveat that everybody calls a conspiracy, but I will remind everybody that we conspiracy theorists were certainly right about the NSA spying on everybody and gathering every bit of information on us. We were also right about what Obamacare was going to do, along with many other things. My latest conspiracy is if he is out of office at the end of his term. I follow the thought, and I'm trying to be very careful here, so it sounds like I don't have my thoughts together, but I do. I follow the thought that if we have these physical attacks like Dan's talking about, and a national emergency is declared, let's say sometime around October of 2016, I could see the possibility that the presidential elections could be pushed back for a certain amount of time because we just don't have any way to count the votes, and it would be unfair to have the election now.
Well, I'll understand what you're saying. I'm going to tell you, where do you read Book 3? Because that scenario is addressed in Book 3. So you're going to have to wait 6 months, but it's in there.
Along those lines, I want to ask you some questions. And you can take as long as you want to answer them. We've got 45 minutes left.
I don't have 45 minutes left, but I'll do the best I can.
Okay, well, say 15 minutes. We got 15 minutes left. How's that sound?
Okay, good.
How would, do you believe, knowing what you know and the books that you've written, how would a terrorism attack start, and would there be a way for we civilians to recognize, let's say, the clues beforehand and during a terrorist attack?
Well, in the traditional Al-Qaeda sense, no. I think that with the security that we've put in place in airports, the ability to steal airplanes full of fuel and jump them into buildings. Again, if you go back and read Book 1, you'll see that the analysis was that, well, it made a great photographic moment. It did shut down the markets for a period of time. It didn't shut down the markets for an extended period of time, years. And so that I think that they've got to be plotting attacks that will have such a significant impact that it will change us for many decades. And so I think it becomes a matter of, as I've illustrated in Book 1, there are 4 scenarios in Book 1, which you're not quite to yet, but we'll get to shortly. And interesting, I have people tell me when I do public speaking and they've read the book, he says, are you not, with your 4 scenarios in Book 1, aren't you giving aid and comfort to the enemy? And I said, no, I don't believe so. And instead of putting that my intention, what I'm trying to say is to help you as a reader understand where I believe we may be vulnerable as a country and we're not paying attention to it. And these 4 scenarios are only 4 out of which are probably many that could have very significant longer-term impact on our economy and on our nation. I did an interview with a radio station in Washington, D.C., and the gentleman who was interviewing me said that 2 years ago, it sounds crazy to say this, but I have every reason to believe what he was telling me was correct. He said several years ago the Department of Defense was asking people like you, meaning me, thrill riders, to create a series of scenarios of how they think terrorists are likely to attack the United States. And I said, well, if that RFP ever comes out again, let me know, because I can submit some ideas. I don't think that we're going to be you can't see the ball coming, like a pitcher throwing to a batter. The batter can see the ball, and he may swing and hit it a third of the time if he's a really good hitter, miss it 7 times out of 10. But the reality is he can see it, but he can't stop it. I don't think that, excuse me, I don't think we're in a situation where we're going to be able to anticipate where the attack's going to come. I know that our technology and our surveillance continues, but in reality, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. There's a lot of stuff I don't know and you don't know about what's going on. But I do believe that they are continuing to plan and trying to figure out how can they reach their ultimate goal. Because remember, these people are goal-driven, and how long it's going to take them is irrelevant to them, and what resources they're going to have to expend is irrelevant to them. I mean, we have a nation of people who fundamentally don't understand how a mother could strap dynamite on the back of her child and send that child into a restaurant to kill people. We can't understand that. It's not in our psyche. It's not in our upbringing. It's not in our moral base. But that's how serious these people are about achieving their goal, domination of the world by Islam. And so we don't have that. In fact, we're trying. We have a long history of going the other way. when we finally get into a fight, it's to protect our freedom and make sure that people are free and independent. They have a goal, and remember, they've been doing this a long time, longer than we are as a nation. And now that there are more of them, and they continue to grow and multiply, there are more and more people who understand this philosophy and are using this philosophy. And as we educate the people, as I've suggested in the book, as we educate the people who are going to attack us, we have to seriously think about that too. Are we going to continue to educate the world and give them all the engineering science, computer science, nuclear science? Are we going to give them all of the tools necessary to attack us out of our own country? That's a big question, and we could do a whole show about that. But the point being is that no, I don't think. I don't think they're going to take planes. They're going to have to, as the head of Al Qaeda said in his September the 12th speech, we have to do something big. I don't know what the big is, but if it happens, it will be big, and it will be something that will change, if they're successful, may well change not only us as a country, but change the world.
Okay, that is an excellent answer. And we'll make this the last question of the show. How does that sound?
That's fine.
Okay, then we'll let you get going. I know the steps that I've taken. I have taken whatever steps that I can to insulate myself and my family from any potential terrorist attacks.
Mm-hmm.
From your point of view, and I want to see how well I've prepared by listening to your answer, what steps can the average person take to insulate themselves from these attacks that we know are coming? What can the average person do starting now? Just maybe $10, $20 a paycheck maybe. What can they do to protect themselves from these economic attacks, the potential attack on the oil pipelines and whatnot?
Well, I'd like to, if I could be so bold as to suggest rephrasing your question.
Go ahead.
What can we do to survive the attack? What do we need to do to survive the attack? I can't tell you when it's coming. I can tell you that I believe the man, that he's going to try. So it's not a matter as if he's going to try. It's when he's going to try. But if he's somewhat successful, what do we have to do to survive? And I'm going to. This is probably going to sound overly symptomatic, but I really believe this. And you'll see this in Book 3 on what should we be doing. I think that cash will be king. If I have a structural problem that I can't run an ATM, then having my money in the bank in an ATM machine will not allow me to get it out. If our credit structure is knocked offline because they've cut out the internet and destroyed the infrastructure for technology, how are we going to have commerce? How are we going to buy food and water and gasoline? I believe cash is king. And I think that what we need, and everybody has to be different, is the realization that we need to have cash on hand. It needs to be in some kind of a safe area, but I think that we will survive going back to a basic fundamental economy that's not based on credit, that's based on cash. And I don't mean gold and silver or diamonds. I mean U.S. greenbacks, dollars. Because if we are attacked, we may find ourselves isolated from the rest of the world, and who cares whether we've got euros or Australian dollars? Doesn't make any difference, because what we're going to spend here in the United States is cash, American dollars. I think we need to have, first of all, some quantity of cash in our hand, probably some foodstuffs. I notice on the website there are various food organizations. I think that probably makes some sense. Some water. Probably needs to have maybe a shotgun or two and some shells. Because when you create a situation where you shut the economy down, where there's no commerce, no credit, no banking institution, no pension checks, no Social Security checks, people will begin to starve. And when people begin to starve, they become irrational, and they're going to go after wherever they can get food for themselves and for their families. Now, I know that sounds a little dire and a little crazy, but having cash on hand is a good way to deal with that. And there's a scene in the book, which you'll get to, where one of the leading characters is asked to go to an ATM machine and get some cash, to have some cash on hand so the family can buy food. And so my point is, you could talk about all kinds of things. Should I get a fallout shelter? Should I build an underground cave and all that stuff? I suppose you could if you want to, but what more than anything else, you can put up some food, and you can buy some freeze-dried food, and that's all good. But ultimately, as we begin to recover from this attack, one of the things that's going to be necessary to pay the bills is cash.
And I have something to add to that, because you've just said exactly what myself and other people have done. Mm-hmm. I would also suggest, and you tell me if this is what you think of this idea. I have been a big believer in also storing up local commodities, things like coffee, liquor, that sort of local commodity. Because when something happens and you need a gallon of gas, what's the guy at the store gonna do? Is he gonna want a bar of silver? Or if you say, I've got a pound of coffee, I'll trade you for a gallon of gas. Which one do you think you mean? Exactly, barter. I believe that those types of commodities, even if it's stale coffee, I mean, what the hell? People are going to be, you're not going to be able to get coffee.
Right. But I understand what you're saying, and I don't totally disagree with what you're saying, but think about it in one other sense. That guy who's running the local gas station that has some gas in the tanks underground, yeah, you could pay him with coffee, but sooner or later when that gas runs out, if he's going to get more, the gas company who's going to deliver gas to his station is going to want to be paid before they pump it in the ground. Not in coffee, but with cash. And so those people who have cash will have the greatest chance of survival.
Well put. And
okay.
We're going to make that the last question and answer of the show, folks. The guest's name is Dan Perkins. His book is The Brotherhood of the Red Nile. You can get it at Amazon. You can get it at USSAMichigan.com. I've got links. You can get it at his website. The entire show and the show notes that we've been referring to during the show will be up on USSAMichigan.com. Mr. Perkins, I appreciate you coming on the show. I really do, and spending so much time with us. You have given the audience a great education and given us solutions, which is what we are looking for.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir. You take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was our guest, Dan Perkins. He is hailing to us from New Jersey. That's actually where I was born, and my mother was raised in New Jersey, so I know the exact area where he lives and what he was saying about September 11th. I will also add, for those of you that are listening, now that our guest is gone, those of you that have hung around and listening to the end of the show or listening to the end of the show on the podcast and the MP3 and the YouTube channel, I have some experience, actual real-world experience, with the suitcase bombs that he was talking about in his interview and in his book. The suitcase bombs, a friend of mine here in Saline, way before I moved here, she was a fellow journalist back when I was doing my newspaper. And I was publishing some of her stories that the local paper, the Saline Observer, I believe it is, wasn't able to publish for editorial reasons. And she called me one day and said, listen, I've got an interview coming up with a guy that's being released from prison, and I'd appreciate it if you were there. So I loaded up my camera and all of my recording equipment, and I went down to the federal prison in Milan, Michigan. And we stood around in the fog waiting for this guy to be released, and he was released. And the federal prison authorities put him in a car and drove him to Ann Arbor, Michigan, to the Greyhound bus station. And we all formed a caravan, went up there. And they said, you're getting on a bus and you're leaving town, and you're going to do it today. The next bus that goes out, we don't care where you're going, you're getting on that bus or else. And they left. So the group of us looked around. There was a TV production crew there, and my friend and myself. And the gentleman who was just released looked around and said, screw that, I want to go to breakfast. So we got in the cars and we went back to Milan, where he was released, and went to a restaurant within a half a mile of the prison. So we're sitting there for a couple hours doing an interview. And his main claim to fame was he had been squawking for years in the 1980s about the Soviet suitcase bombs that were missing. He had proof that they were missing, and he was one of the people that was involved with Oliver North. You remember Oliver North and the Sandinistas and everything. He was there in Central America, working for a three-letter agency, and he came across the information about these suitcase bombs, and he started telling the government, you've got a big problem, because these suitcase bombs are missing. So, like any good government, the federal government did what they could and got him on tax evasion and put him in prison. And while he was in prison, he was making even more noise. So they wound up releasing him just to shut him the hell up. So we're in the restaurant, the TV crew's all set up, and they're filming their interview and everything, and we were allowed to talk to him too. And I asked a simple question at the time. I said, so if these suitcase bombs are missing, how many of them do you think are in the United States? And that's when the interview ended. He looked at me, he looked at the TV crew. The TV crew said, you're done. We're done. They shut off the cameras, and that was that. I never got an answer to that question. So you can take that for what it's worth. At any rate, my name is Bill Zam, and yes, this is only an hour-and-a-half show tonight, but since I am own SETV, and Andy owns Freedom Talk Radio, we're the bosses, so we'll end the show whenever the hell we feel like it. So I'm going to end the show in an hour-and-a-half tonight. And this will be on USSAMichigan.com. It will be on the YouTube channel, and it's going to go into the rotation on the Shoutcast server. So, my name is Bill Zam. I appreciate everybody showing up for the show. And remember, be safe out there, and be kind to each other. And we will talk to you next Saturday when we have another fabulous guest on the show. Good night.